Today we're doing our first mock draft of the 2020 season, coming right up. And welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast today. Today is Saturday, August 1st, 2020. I am Chip and I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening. If you're a new listener, you can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio. You can also watch us on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode and continue just to support the podcast. It meant a lot to me to see the numbers continue to grow. We just finished the month of July and great success. 5 times more listeners and downloads in the month of July than it was in the month of June. So let's continue to allow this to explode. I'm super grateful for everyone listening, and it's just really cool to see just weekly how the numbers continue to grow and get more, branched out more across the country and into other countries. It's been an awesome thing to see. So thank you so much. So I hope everyone's having a good start to the weekend as well. Today is a special mock draft podcast. Training camp is going to start soon. Players are already reporting. So today I wanted to do a mock draft to kind of give you an idea on where players are being drafted at. It's a great tool to try to dominate your drafts and kind of get a feel on where players are being drafted at, because the last thing you want to do is go into the draft with completely blind expectations and not understanding like what players are being overvalued, undervalued. And that's the most part why we do these podcasts and these YouTube videos, because it allows you to kind of know where players are being, ranked at and where they may be going in certain drafts. So today we're going to do a mock draft, and there's really no set strategy. This mock draft is pretty much what players are coming to me in a sense of where my draft position will be at. So I will be doing one that's really running back heavy with 0 running back, and then wide receiver heavy, just because it gives you a better outlook on what your team structure could look like. So right now, let's jump into the news. There's been big news out of Kansas City. Damien Williams, the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, has opted out of the 2020 season. Of course, this skyrockets Clyde Edwards-Helaire's value. And of course, it comes on the week that I had him in my Clyde Edwards-Helaire in my overvalued video. But you can't do anything about that. That's fantasy football. Things change all the time. And with a player of that name dropping out, it just puts Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that now guaranteed top 12 to possibly top 5 running back position, in the sense of where he could be drafted, where he could be ending the season ranked at, in the sense of where he, his stats and all that. So it's very interesting to see a player of that caliber opting out, because, running backs have a very, very short, shelf life in the NFL. And for him to opt out of this year, it's really interesting to see how many other players are going to opt out that are bigger names. So, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's going to be someone that's going to just continue to go up the draft boards. And we don't get a preseason, so we have no idea how this is going to affect him in the sense of like what he's going to be able to do in training camp. Just because he's learned a new offense, he hasn't had the full offseason to acclimate to the system. So it's going to be interesting if the Kansas City Chiefs are going to now rely on more DeAndre Washington, who they signed in the offseason from the Raiders, and then they still have Darrell Williams, and they have Darwin Thompson. So I still think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the running back to own, obviously, because he is in the best offense in football. But I'm concerned to see how much of his usage will be there in the beginning of the season. My guess, he will be getting most of the touches, but don't discount that he is still a rookie, and that they did bring in a veteran like DeAndre Washington in, who filled in pretty nicely when Josh Jacobs went out last year. So just really look into that and just kind of see where he's at, and continue to listen to the podcast. I'll continue to give out information once I hear it and see it and all that. But huge news out of Kansas City. And then next, LaShawn McCoy signs a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, with me being a Bucs fan, this tells me that maybe they're not really comfortable with what they have at running back. LaShawn McCoy was a guy that we felt was going to be really exciting last year in the Kansas City offense, and it just didn't transpire the way that we had hoped in a sense of fantasy value and fantasy just production. Now, I think this is for depth, obviously. I think this is a Tom Brady move. I think Tom Brady needed a veteran in there to help with, pass protections and all that stuff. Someone he felt comfortable with. Now, I'm not discounting that Ronald Jones is a running back to own in the Tampa Bay backfield, but now it makes me concerned with now adding LaShawn McCoy and then drafting Keyshawn Vaughn. I'm just wondering, is there really a running back we want to own that's fantasy relevant in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense? So it's going to be a wait and see process, but to me, I think that this was, like I said, it was a Tom Brady move that I think he really wants somebody that he could trust as a veteran, especially in a off season where there are not a lot of reps going on, not a lot of off season mini camps and everything like that. So something to look after, but I don't think LaShawn McCoy is someone you draft, in fantasy. I think it's someone that's kind of a wait and see approach. He may be a waiver wire ad, but I want to see what he does in the offense, just because what we saw in Kansas City last year wasn't LaShawn McCoy we're used to seeing, but it's something to keep your eyes on. And then Antonio Brown has been suspended for the first 8 weeks of 2020. This was inevitable. We knew that this was going to happen. We didn't know exactly how many games he was going to get, but the fact that he got only 8 games makes me think that the NFL expects somebody to sign him. I think obviously Baltimore has been in the news a lot more with having the idea of signing him. I think that Lamar Jackson really wants him. Obviously, Antonio Brown's cousin, Hollywood Brown, is on the roster as well. So I think that is something that's a high risk, high reward type of situation. He's not going to be signed for very much, so I think that that's something to continue to monitor throughout the season, because we knew that there was some type of suspension going to happen. Just didn't know when. So now that it's official, I think that it's more than likely that Antonio Brown will be with the team at some point this season. Now, on the defense side of the ball, Joey Bosa signs a 5-year, $135 million contract with the Chargers. I mean, this was something that had to be done. He's a difference maker on that team. He's pretty much their franchise player right now. So to get him to be locked up for the next 5 years is a good option for the Chargers. I think that when he's healthy, he is a top 5 pass rusher. So it's good that they got him locked up. And now going back to, we talked about Damien Williams opting out. There are some more notable names that have opted out for the 2020 season. Today, CJ Mosley has announced that he's opted out of the 2020 season with the New York Jets. Huge blow for the New York Jets defense. He is the difference maker on that defense, and the fact that he is opting out to not play, it's really going to hurt them. So, he's a big name on the defensive side of the ball. So we're going to see how many other players will opt out when we get closer to the season. And also, Devin Funchess has opted out. So Devin Funchess he signed with the Green Bay Packers in the offseason. And the fact that he has opted out is a big blow to them. But the good thing is the Packers went wide receiver heavy in the draft. So they shouldn't see much of an issue with that, which I hope you can notice that my sarcasm is there. It's a big blow to the offense for the Packers. I mean, Devin Funchess was the other vet that Aaron Rodgers could lean on. And I really do think that this actually helps Allen Lazard. I think that he is now the number 2 guy to own in Green Bay. So he's probably somebody that you can get super cheap late in the draft that could have a lot of upside, just because now Devin Funchess has opted out. And the same thing going for Jalen Reagor. So Jalen Reagor is the rookie wide receiver that was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. And Marquise Goodwin opted out this past week for COVID concerns as well. And then you have Alshon Jeffrey possibly missing the first 6 weeks of the season and going on the PUP list. So Doug Peterson has now reported that Jalen Reagor will be getting most of the reps in the X position, which is the starting wide receiver position. So I think that is another player that is going to be pretty affordable in drafts. That's probably going to be the number 1 receiver in Philadelphia. So that's another guy that I would target as well late in drafts, just because the targets will be there. It looks like the reps will be there in the during training camp. So I'm definitely going to try to grab Jalen Reagor as much as I can in a lot of my leagues. And then lastly, pretty much the whole New England Patriots team has opted out of the 2020 season. This is getting crazy. I don't think there's been another team that has so many opted out players. I just beginning to wonder what's really going on in that actual franchise, to see Tom Brady leave, to see some of the players opting out. Now, it could just be completely irrelevant. It could be just a coincidence, but I don't know if this is a way to, stick it to Belichick. I don't know if there's really a lot of concerns about COVID in the locker rooms that us as casual fans don't know behind the scenes. I know there's been issues, the players been acting out in the sense of talking on Twitter and all that about their protocols and everything, but it's interesting to see how New England Patriots are taking such a huge hit. Now, a lot of people are saying that this could be because they want Trevor Lawrence in the draft next year, that this could be a year that they tank to get the best quarterback coming out of college next year. I don't know. I don't see that being a Bill Belichick type move. If the Patriots, we know that Bill Belichick is a great Hall of Fame, probably one of the best coaches to ever be in the game. If he's able to do anything with the players that he has around him who are opting out, that have been opted out, and then they still have a winning season, they make the playoffs, I mean, it just goes to show out Bill Belichick can do anything from a coaching standpoint and win with any player that he has on the roster. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And then one other note, Dalvin Cook, there was talks back and forth with Dalvin Cook, wanting to hold out for more money for a contract extension. But with the new CBA in place, if for every day he does not come to camp, that's a $50,000 fine. So I can't see Dalvin Cook missing out on too much time just because it's such a hefty fine every single day that he misses. So we're looking to what's going on in Minnesota. I still have confidence that he'll get signed. I think he'll still show up to camp. He's something that I have ranked 4 in my rankings. So Dalvin Cook is somebody that I just don't feel like he's going to just miss a season or anything like that. So that's the news. So right now, let's jump into the mock draft. I am using Sleeper app. This is a pretty modifiable app that you can use for anything that you have for roster structure, for how many teams you have in your league, and everything like that. So the draft that I'll be doing today will be a 12-team PPR snake draft. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. Okay, we have our draft set up on Sleeper app. We have a 12-team snake draft PPR league. We have the roster structure of 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, a flex, a kicker, a defense, and then 6 bench spots. So right now, I got randomized to pick at the 3rd position overall. So let's go ahead and jump into the draft and see exactly how this draft plays out for us. So you can see the whole draft board at YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. So right now, the draft has begun. Dalvin Cook, what's crazy, he is the number 1 draft pick. That's odd. Why not Christian McCaffrey? And then the 2nd pick was Michael Thomas. So right now, Christian McCaffrey had fallen in my lap at the 3rd spot overall. So obviously that's an obvious choice. I'm picking Christian McCaffrey. And then let's see how the other round drafts, the draft plays out in the 1st round. After me, you had Saquon Barkley. Then Devontae Adams was a 5th overall pick in the 1st round. Following up with Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry went at the 1-7. You had Zeke, Kenyon Drake. Then Tyreek Hill was the 3rd receiver at the 1-10. Then you had Josh Jacobs at the 1-11, so he was pretty highly, drafted, with Julio Jones rounding out the 1st round at the 1-12. Now in the turnaround, this is the guy that we were talking about in the beginning of the podcast, was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now we knew that his draft stock was going to skyrocket, and right now he was the second, in the 2nd round, he was the 1st pick. So he went at the 2-1. So I think that's where you're going to see him. I don't think he'll be a 1st round pick just yet, but it won't be far off where he is going to be right now. He got drafted at the 2-1. I think that is about where he'll go. He may creep in the 1st round, ahead of guys like Kenyon Drake or Josh Jacobs. And then another notable name, Patrick Mahomes went to 2-5, following that with Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, and then Travis Kelce was the 1st tight end off the board at the 2-8. And then it's now my pick. Now with running back, I like doing running back heavy drafts. I always go, especially I play in a lot of PPR leagues, so I like going for guys who are PPR targets. And right now, the best running back that's there is Austin Eckler. So with me having Christian McCaffrey at my running back, 1 position, I'm taking Austin Eckler at my number 2, just because on the turnaround I can still get a good wide receiver. So I'd rather solidify my running back position. So following out the 2nd round was Lamar Jackson, than Chris Godwin. So then on the 3-1, it was Todd Gurley, then Chris Carson went. Now for me, I have a choice. I can go for wide receiver, or I can continue to build my running back position. Looking at what's available at running back, we do have Leonard Fournette. I don't like Leonard Fournette as much as most people do this year. I think he's a guy that's really going to take a step backwards because he was a PPR machine last year. He has so many catches. I don't see that happening again. So there's James Conner there, and then there's, I can pick either, Kenny Galladay, Adam Thielen, Juju, or OBJ. What I'm going to do, because I like running back positions as much as the next guy, I'm going to draft James Conner. I know that's probably off of what most people will do, but I like James Conner this year. I think he's going to be a bounce back player. And then it followed me up with David Johnson and Leonard Fournette. And then you had George Kittle at the 3-6. And then there was a little bit of a run at wide receiver. You had Kenny Galladay, Allen Robinson, Juju, Adam Thielen, and then there was a split up with Melvin Gordon at the 3-11, with Odell Beckham at the 3-12. And then on the flip side, at the 4-1, there was Le'Veon Bell start off the 4th round, followed up with Jonathan Taylor. Now, this is the thing that you have to worry about in drafts. There's going to be runs, right? But there's enough wide receivers out there where I don't feel like you have to be so, anxious about getting a wide receiver. But right after Jonathan Taylor was drafted at the 4-2, we have Mark Andrews, the tight end for Baltimore, at the 4-3, followed up with Mark Ingram at the 4-4. And then we saw a run of wide receiver. We have Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, AJ Brown, Cooper Kupp, and DJ Shark. So now I have 3 good running backs. I like my running backs. So now it's up for me to try to figure out, okay, where I want to go at wide receiver. And right there at wide receiver, there is Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley is going to be a stud this year. I think that there's a chance that he could end the season in the top 10. So getting him at the 4-10 is I think, great value. So I'm taking Calvin Ridley. And then the 4th round rounds out with Devin Singletary, then David Montgomery. Now to start the 5th round, there's DK Metcalf at the 5-1, followed up with Robert Woods at the 5-2. It's back to my pick. Now I'm going to go ahead and see what's available at running back. Not really anybody that I would want to waste a draft pick this high on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at wide receiver, and I have my options of T.Y. Hilton, Keenan Allen, and Terry McLaurin. I think T.Y. Hilton does have a bounce back season, but honestly, with Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin, I honestly am going to go Keenan Allen. I think that he's getting undervalued a lot this year. I understand he doesn't have Phillip Rivers anymore, but I do think Keenan Allen does bring a lot of value, especially at the 5-3. So I'm going to pick Keenan Allen. And then it follows me up with T.Y. Hilton. And then Kyler Murray was the 3rd quarterback off the board at the 5-5. And now let's see who comes around my... Not really a lot of crazy runs. Okay, so Dak Prescott got drafted at the 6-9. I'm drafted at the 6-10. So notable players I got off the board before I was able to draft. You had, Terry McLaurin that I was just talking about went at the 5-9. Raheem Mostert went at the 5-10. Darren Waller was at the 5-11. And then you had DeAndre Swift, the rookie running back for Detroit, going and round out the 5th round at the 5-12. Following up with another rookie at Cam Akers at the 6-1. Then you had a couple. We had Darius Geis, Ronald Jones. Then you had AJ Green, Cortland Sutton, and Stephon Diggs. Now it's my pick. What's nice about what I did in the draft, now I have an option to pick best player available if I would like to. And at running back, there's not really a lot of guys that I want to really go after. I mean, there's James White. I just don't know if it's going to be the same value that you saw when he was with Tom Brady. You had J.K. Dobbins. I don't know if I want to draft him this high. I think he still has to get through Mark Ingram, and Justice Hill still there in Baltimore. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to receiver and see what I have available there. And, you have some decent options. You have Marquise Brown. You have Devontae Parker, Julian Edelman, Brandon Cooks, Jarvis Landry, Michael Gallup. Not really anybody that I want to take right now. I'm going to go over to the tight end and see what's at tight end. I love Gronk this year. He's the first, top tight end available, the best tight end available. I could grab him here, but I think I'm going to go ahead and go back to wide receiver. And going through the list here, I'm going to go and pick. I'm going to go with Marquise Brown. I think he's another guy that's being undervalued. I think he's a guy that will take the next step forward this year. And then you got Devontae Parker coming in at 7-1, and then Brandon Cooks at the 7-2. Brandon Cooks is a very interesting guy to me. Brandon Cooks, he's one concussion away from his career ending. He's had so many concussions every single year and throughout his career. I'm just kind of worried about him, and I don't like taking risks with players that are have a lot of injuries, especially with concussions, and just especially like Will Fuller having the soft tissue injuries that he has every year. I just don't know if I really want to take Brandon Cooks that early. He's just not a guy that's ever been on my draft board, but it is what it is. Now I'm looking at my options here, and honestly, I'm not really liking what's really available. Jarvis Landry's there, but I'm not sure if I really want to draft Jarvis Landry that early. I mean, it's not really early, but just going through my options. I'm not going for a quarterback. It's too early for a quarterback. I'm going to be a homer right now. I'm going to take Rob Gronkowski because I don't think he'll be there after I draft after the 7th round. I don't think he'll be there on my turnaround. So I'm going to take Rob Gronkowski just so I know I get a tight end that I think can blow up and be a top tight end. And then after that, we have J.K. Dobbins went after that, after Gronk, after I took him. And then you had Jordan Howard. I think Jordan Howard, too, is a sneaky guy, too, because I know they have Matt Breida in Miami, but Jordan Howard is a good running back, and he is able to, give you some fancy production. Basically what he was doing, he was a starter when Miles Sanders was there in Philadelphia, and Miles Sanders really only blew up until, after Jordan Howard went down. So I think that's an interesting guy that you could get for a late flyer. And then you follow that up at the 7-6 and the 7-7 with Drew Brees and Matt Ryan. I still think it's a little too early. If you're playing a one quarterback league, I just think it's way too early to pick a guy that early, just because we know that you can stream guys all the time. To finish out Hayden Hurst finished out the 7th round. Hayden Hurst went at the 7-12, which that's about right. I mean, he's being drafted, but he was drafted before Tyler Higbee, which is interesting because I think Tyler Higbee is going to have another blow-up season. We don't know what Hayden Hurst is. We know Hayden Hurst could have potential to be a top tight end. We just don't know exactly how that's going to play out for Atlanta and for him this year. And then Tom Brady begins the 8th round. Then you have Michael Gallup. Keyshawn Vaughn went at the 8-4. And then you had Tevin Coleman go at the 8-5. Followed with Will Fuller, Marvin Jones. Then Alexander Madison. I think Alexander Madison's an interesting pick. I think that with Dalvin Cook, we don't know exactly what's going on. Obviously what I said earlier on the podcast, that he's subject to a $50,000 fine for each day that he misses. So Alexander Madison could be a guy that he's like Kareem Hunt to me. I think he is on weeks he could be a flex option. So I think Alexander Madison has a great value. Now for me, it's my pick. I'm going to look at receiver again. And honestly, I like Deebo Samuel. I think that this is just a flyer pick because I know he's hurt. There's a chance that he's going to miss the first 6 weeks of the season. But you can get him super late in drafts, and for value that once he comes back, I think you have a starting caliber wide receiver that could help you make a playoff push. And then the 8th round rounds it up with Sony Michel. Sony Michel was on the board. I was going to draft him, but he's coming off a foot injury, and I don't know how much I feel confident in a foot injury for a running back. I think what's being kind of going on the radar is Damien Harris. Damien Harris is the backup at New England, and I think that I would rather draft Damien Harris before Sony Michel. I know that seems like a hot take, whatever, but I am concerned with anybody who has a foot injury. That I know I just picked up Deebo Samuel, but I think for running back, the wear and tear that happens on the running back position, the cuts and everything that goes on, I do think that Sony Michel, unfortunately, will be a backup to Damien Harris at some point this year. And then you got Aaron Rodgers finish up the 8th round, and then at the 9-1 you have Dante Johnson, followed with Matt Breida. Now it's my pick. Now I right now can go anywhere I want. I can pick a receiver. I can pick a running back. This is the type of the draft where you try to go for value and hopefully people that break out. For me, at the running back position, there is not really anybody that I think I need to get right now. I think I can wait on a couple guys. I personally like Antonio Gibson, who's with the Washington football team. He's a guy that he's a hybrid from wide receiver to running back. So I'm going to look at what's going on at the wide receiver position. Emmanuel Sanders is right there. I like Emmanuel Sanders. I think he is going to be productive. He's in a very pass-heavy offense. I think having Emmanuel Sanders there, and he's not going to be a guy that I'm going to start. I have Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Marquise Brown, Deebo Samuel, and Emmanuel. I mean, that's great depth for me, I think. And that's what you want. When you get to the later parts of the draft, you want to find good quality depth. And for me, I felt Emmanuel Sanders was the best option at that point. Now it's my turn back at the 10-10. Some of the guys that went before that are notable. You have Hunter Henry went at the 9-8. Then you have Henry Ruggs actually went at the 10-4, which is interesting. But then you got, this is a simulated draft. We have the San Francisco defense and the Buffalo Bill defense going at the 10-6, at the 10-9. Just for future reference, please don't draft a defense this early. There's no point. You're going to stream defenses anyways. The fact that they used such a high draft pick is not something that you want to do. If your teammates or your league mates want to do that, that's better for you, but I wouldn't do it. I never have done it, so I would stay and shy way far away from picking up a defense. Now it's my turn again at the 10-10. Now, what I mentioned earlier on in the actual podcast as well is that Jalen Reagor has a chance to be a stud this year because Marquise Goodwin and then Alshon Jeffrey are not going to be there. At least Alshon Jeffrey won't be there because of the injury, but Marquise Goodwin opted out. So Jalen Reagor is sitting right there. I have no problem taking him. I feel comfortable. My draft's starting to become very, very wide receiver heavy. So what I'm going to do is pick Jalen Reagor up. And then I was hoping Antonio Gibson was going to fall to me. He went right at the 10-11. To follow up, the 10th round was Daniel Jones. So now that was one guy that was high on at running back. So let's look at the running back position and see what's available. I really don't like a lot of things that are here. I mean, Tony Pollard, he's a guy that's a handcuff. When I'm looking at this part of the draft, I'm not really looking at handcuffs right now. I'm more looking at guys that can actually be a flex or a starter for me when I need them. And right now, my options are Tony Pollard, Darrell Henderson Jr., Boston Scott, Duke Johnson, and Damien Harris. Like I said, I had spoken about Damien Harris early on about the show, like why I would take him over Sony Michel. So I'm going to actually live up to that, and I'm going to take Damien Harris right now. So at the 11-3, Damien Harris is going to be my fourth running back on the roster behind Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, and James Conner. And then, Tony Pollard went it right after my pick, and then you have the Baltimore Ravens going at the 11-5. And then it looks like the round 11 was really defensive heavy with the Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Bears going out in the 11th round. And then follow that up with, at the 12-3, have the New England Patriots. So, and then there you go. The first kicker gets off the board at Justin Tucker at the 12-4. Like I said, don't waste valuable draft picks on picking up a defense and a kicker before your last two picks of the draft. Regardless of how many draft and rounds you have, those don't need to be important, pieces of your roster. And then you got my picks up now. So right now, I'm going to try to pick what's best available. What's nice about the Sleeper app, they give you all their rankings based on the ADP and all that and what's best available. And right now, I do need a quarterback. Right now, it's the 12th round. I feel like there's Big Ben, there's Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Teddy Bridgewater. That's my option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield is going to have a great season. I think he has a bounce back season. I said it in my bounce back podcast a few weeks ago that Baker Mayfield has all the options to be a top, have a way to get into that top 12 finish this year. So I'm going to take Baker Mayfield as my quarterback. And then it follows up with Ben Roethlisberger, and then the Chargers defense rounds out the 12th round at the 12-12. And what's interesting about what happened at the 13-1, Chris Thompson went at the 13-1. So what I was saying before with Leonard Fournette, Leonard Fournette is a guy that I don't think is going to have the same season he had last year, because I think that you kind of go what happened. They brought in Chris Thompson. Chris Thompson is known to be a PPR machine, so I think that a lot of the production, if Leonard Fournette's going to be fantasy relevant, he's going to have to do it with touchdowns this year. He definitely is going to get the yardage. He's going to get the touches, but what made him so good last year, even when he didn't have the touchdowns, was his reception. So bringing in Chris Thompson really, I think, takes away from Leonard Fournette's overall value. So now it's my turn. This is going to be my last skill player pick before I pick my defense and my kicker. So looking at what's going on in the running back position, I could pick up A.J. Dillon. There's Anthony McFarland Jr. and Carlos Hyde. Now LaShawn McCoy's come up on the draft board because he just got picked up by the Bucs. Looking at wide receiver, I have a lot of wide receivers here, but it's hard to not think about picking up someone like Allen Lazard because of Devin Funchess going out. I want to stay true to what I tell you guys in the podcast. So really looking at running back, I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go wide receiver again because I think there's value there. So I'm going to pick up Allen Lazard as my last skilled player just because I think regardless of how your draft plays out, I think that even if you draft heavy in one position, you do have trades that you can make. So trades are going to be beneficial to you. So if you draft very well and you have these players that you can trade for other pieces, it's going to be key for you. So don't be shy of going so heavy with one particular position. For me, it was wide receiver this draft. Next time I do a mock draft, it could be running back. But I think this is a good tool to be able to determine what my team can be like if I have a certain draft position and then how the draft falls to me. So this is how the draft fell to me based on what I think, my opinions about the players that I like. So right now I'm at the 14-10. So obviously this is the round where everybody has picked up either a kicker or a defense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at kicker, see what's available at kicker. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take... At kickers, you always want to look at who has the best offense. So high-powered offenses are better for all the kickers that you get. So right now I'm going to take Jake Elliott. He's the best one available right now, but I think that the Philadelphia offense is good enough to be able to draft. And he has a week 9 bye, so if I decide to keep Jake Elliott for the first 9 weeks of the season, it's going to be kudos to me just because I don't have to worry about that position. So I'm going to take Jake Elliott. And then the 14th round rounds out with the Tampa Bay Bucs and Jonnu Smith, the tight end for the Tennessee Titans. And then now I have to take a defense. Usually on defenses, I like taking defenses I go week to week. So I try to change out defenses every week. But based on what's available right now, the New Orleans Saints defense is there for me to take. I don't want to take the New Orleans Saints defense because they played the Bucs in week 1. I necessarily don't think that's a good pickup, right? So looking at what's available, and I don't memorize the actual schedule for week 1 off the top of my head. I just know obviously the Saints-Bucs game is the number 1 game. So for right now, I'm just going to take the Vikings defense. I like the Vikings defense. I think they have a lot of great pieces there. So I can always switch that out after the draft. Looking at the actual teams available that are there for defense, looking at the week 1 matchups, I can always change that. But right now, we have Preston Williams goes in the 15-4. Michael Pittman Jr. goes at the 15-5. And then, Jimmy Garoppolo was the last quarterback drafted at the 15-7. And then LaShawn McCoy did get drafted. LaShawn McCoy got drafted at the 15-10. And then there's a player that a lot of people are high on, or some players, is Blake Jarwin. Blake Jarwin is the tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. There's a lot of people in the fantasy community that think that Blake Jarwin has a breakout season this year. I know that the Dallas Cowboys do utilize the tight end position, but I don't know enough about Blake Jarwin to know if I want to feel comfortable to actually draft him. I know that he's a talent. He's an NFL player. He has good talent, but I haven't seen enough of him on the field to feel comfortable taking him. But honestly, take him at 15-11. That's not a bad pickup. I mean, that's a late flyer guy that you can get and hopefully turn into a starter. So that ends the draft. So looking back on my team, my running backs right now, I have Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, James Conner, and then Damian Harris. My wide receivers, I have Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Marquise Brown, Deebo Samuel, Emmanuel Sanders, Jalen Reagor, and then Alan Lazard. My tight end is Gronk. My quarterback is Baker Mayfield, and my kicker is Jake Elliott, and then the Minnesota Vikings defense. So I think that is, a decent, start to your draft. You don't win your season, you don't win your championship in the draft. A lot of these things will change. A lot of the rankings will change where these players will come. So thank you so much for listening today. Today, like I said, was the first mock draft of the 2020 season. Next video that I post and podcast I post this week will be the must-have quarterbacks for the 2020 season. So thank you so much for listening today. If you want to follow us up on social media, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at the Gridiron Pod. You can find us on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. And please support the show by going to YouTube and going to Apple Podcasts or any outlet that you're watching or listening to the podcast. And please hit subscribe to support the show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.